Anyway, today we'll give a brief overview of genetic algorithms, followed by a live code exercise for you to implement one of your own. And if we have time afterwards, we'll discuss why genetic algorithms are useful in the field of AI. For those of you in the in-person audience, we ask that you please hold on to any questions you have until after we reach the stopping point. However, for those of you in the virtual audience, due to stream delays, we invite you to post any questions you have in chat whenever, and we'll answer them when we stop for questions. Sounds good? Okay, cool. So before we can even talk about evolution, we have to clear something up. What is not evolution? So contrary to game logic, evolution isn't spontaneous like you've been led to believe from games like Pokemon, Pokemon Ripoff 1, and Pokemon Ripoff 2. In reality, biological evolution is the process by which new populations of living things develop through successive generations via natural selection. Basically, evolution describes the lengthy process by which organisms change between generations. And the way that organisms change is influenced by what traits make them fit for survival and reproduction. This property of survivability is called fitness, which you've probably heard in phrases like survival of the fittest, which is like the fundamental principle of natural selection, as we will illustrate in this almost insultingly simple flowchart of evolution. The fittest among the initial population survive, usually because they can carry some trait that gives them an advantage over other individuals. These become the mating pool, the group of individuals who now have the opportunity to reproduce. In the process of breeding, crossover happens where children inherit the genes of both parents. Sometimes random mutations will occur in the process. And this may lead to the development of more beneficial or harmful traits. Since those with the beneficial trait are more likely to survive and reproduce, the following population of children are more likely to have that beneficial trait. This whole process constitutes a single generation. And as the beneficial trait propagates across generations, the average fitness of the population increases. This process is what genetic algorithms are based off of. Are there any quick questions about evolution before we move on? Okay, cool. I'm not a bio major anyway, so genetic algorithms are like basically just simulated evolutions. They aim to generate populations of candidate solutions, meaning possible solutions to some computational problem, through successive generations via selection by fitness. Basically, it's a way to find solutions to really complicated problems through brute force. And there are some like really complicated problems out there that are really difficult to write algorithms for. One such example is like walking. Figuring out in what ways to precisely move every muscle would take like a really long time. Instead, we could try a bunch of randomized strategies, combine solutions that work well, and then repeat that a bunch of times. And by the time we do that a couple, 999 times, we might have something that actually works well. And the whole process is pretty much identical to evolution. Then, in this case, each individual in the population is a candidate solution, and its fitness measures how well that candidate can solve the given problem. We also use fitness to determine how likely the individual is to make it into the mating pool through selection. Crossover and mutation can occur in a lot of different ways, and we'll look at one way of doing so in the live code exercise shortly. Remember that when beneficial traits propagate across generations, average fitness increases. So in a genetic algorithm, this means that we are generating better and better solutions to the problem. This is the most basic form of a genetic algorithm, but we can tweak it a bit to make it more efficient. Since our goal is to find the optimal solution to a problem, we want to continue considering as many of the best solutions as possible. So many genetic algorithms will also preserve the best candidates in the next generation. We call this handful of best candidates the elites in a generation. While the other candidates are selected into the mating pool randomly in proportion to their fitness, we automatically bring elites into the mating pool to make sure that we can propagate the best traits into the next generation. And then we also keep the elites around for the next generation itself. This allows the algorithm to continue considering these top solutions in the later generations. Okay, so that's like a basic overview of genetic algorithms conceptually. Are there any questions on anything so far before we move into the live exercise? Okay, cool. In that case, we're moving on to the live exercise right now, which Nolan will walk you through. Nolan?
All right. Hello, everyone. So right, so this is our example of genetic evolution of traveling salesman. So first of all, what is a traveling salesman? So if you aren't familiar with the problem of the traveling salesman, imagine yourself to be a salesman traveling around to a set of different cities to sell your wares, right? However, you can only visit each city once. What's the shortest possible route you could take visiting each city before returning to your starting city? So we could go ahead and use generic algorithm to generate a bunch of salesmen, right? Population of salesmen. And we could try using this survival of the fittest idea to kind of create a somewhat optimal solution of a traveling salesman. So here we start off with simple imports, like a scientific package for math, NumPy, random, pandas. So we first define our cities here with X and Y coordinates, right? These are the cities that our salesman is going to be traveling to. And you see here, these are attributes. And we have a function for our distance to calculate the distance from itself to a different city. So moving along, this is an example list of a city we'll be using throughout the code. Cities equals, so these are, so from building on from earlier, each city has our coordinates, right? So we have city at 1177, sorry. So we go ahead and run this. And this distribution should be available on ACM URL that we have there. Hold on, sorry. Okay, so now we have our cities defined, and we move on to a salesman class, right? So this is our actual salesman himself. He has a certain list of cities that he's going to travel to, as well as a distance and a fitness. So fitness here is going to be how fit he is, or how efficiently his route so far through the cities are. So we have a function called total distance, where we add up the sums of all the distances between each city, right? So we simply just iterate through each city, and we call our distance function to kind of just add everything up, right? And yeah, as I said earlier, fitness is how efficient or how fit the salesman is. We define, or we kind of like, we use an arbitrary number to define fitness, and here we really just use 1 divided by the total distance as fitness. So as it gets closer to 1, our salesman is getting more fit. So yeah, and we run a example here of salesman, right, named Bob. So we have a city path here. It goes to these initial cities, and his whole distance is 153, and his fitness is 0.006, so not that bad. So going on, we generate a salesman here, right? So this is an exercise I want you all to try looking through. So how do you think we're going to generate our salesman based on what we have defined earlier? Okay, so we could go ahead and do this by kind of just generating a random sample by using by defining a variable and setting it to so we use our random package to create a random list of cities. What we're doing here is we're basically just randomizing the list of cities that we had earlier, and we're returning it as a salesman. And as you see here, we have this randomized from our original list of cities. Okay, so moving on to our initial population. What we're going to do here is we're going to actually loop through this and generate a salesman for each of our, for how many salesmen we want. So so we're basically just going to iterate over size, right? So for I in range 0, size, we append basically a salesman to our population list. And then afterwards, because now we have this initial population of our salesmen, what we want to do is we want to rank them based on how fit each of them are. And this is essentially what this function here does, rank salesmen. So we rank them based on fitness. So the closer they are to 1, the further up they are, there will be in the list. So they'd be at like index 0. So that's the most fit salesman in that population. And as we go along into this test here, so we go ahead and run here, and this is what we'll return. So we get a list of tuples, right? An index 1 and our fitness score here. So that means our salesman is going to be, so our best performing salesman is at fitness, is at index 1 and has a fitness score of this here. And from this, because now we have everything sorted out, we could go ahead and run it through a selection function. So this is an exercise here for you guys to do. So we have, we're selecting from, we want to select the top few from our population. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to cut out the top few performing from our population. It's survival of the fittest. So we're going to take that and add it to a new list called results here. And yeah, so this is an exercise for here. This should be like a simple list. So we're going to iterate through like, sorry. So what we're going to do here is we're going to, for I in range, okay, so we go through our elite size. And we're basically just going to append each of the top elite into our population, right? Okay, and then from the rest, what we have here is we're going to use pandas to randomly add our salesmen from our population to our list. Okay, so we basically pick a random number from 0 to 100. That's what this function is doing here. Random.random is going to pick a random number from 0 to 1, and we're going to multiply it 100. And for our I in range, so we're going to iterate through like our ranked population, and if it's less than or equal to an arbitrary random number, we're going to append that to our population, to our results, right? So we're going to mix in the elite with random numbers from our population, from our original population. So we have something to work with. So it's not just our elite as well. It gives kind of like a random data to work with. And afterwards, we put that into our mating pool. Our mating pool is basically our entire collection of our population that's ready to kind of like crossbreed together, right? So using the indices we generated earlier, remember when we made that list of like fitness scores and indices? So using that our indices earlier, we're going to create a mating pool from our selection results, and this is what mating pool is doing here. We're going to run that. So it iterates over selection results, and it creates like this list of salesmen. So here we give a demo here of our salesmen. This is an example of mating pool. It's just a huge list of all these salesmen with different distances, and they're all ordered, kind of. And yeah, so afterwards we move on to crossover. So we wrote a crossover function where we take two of these salesmen and we basically combine their genes so that they create a child. So we have, okay, so remember earlier when we defined that each salesman had cities? So we're going to take that, we're going to take those lists of cities, and we're going to get random indices from from the entirety of like this genetic code from parent 1, right? So this is what we're doing here, where we have index 1 and index 2. So we're taking from our parent 1's genes, and we're going to take a subsection of that. This is where our index begins, and this is where our index ends. So we're basically splicing these genes, and we're taking them out from index 1, and we're going to just set them to a start gene and end gene here. So we could loop them through later on and put them into our child. So here we have our start gene and end gene. And we could go ahead by taking, our start gene is going to be a minimum of these two indices, so it's just going to be minimum of index 1 and index 2. And our end gene is going to be our maximum of our index 1 and index 2. Okay. And yeah, so we take the genes to be the ones from parent 1, and the rest of the genes we're just going to basically append them to the end. So as you see here, it's just parent 2, so it's everything that was not chosen in this loop here. And we have an example here of two salesmen, right? Joe. Okay, so I created another salesman named Joe, and this is the child of Joe and Bob. So as you see here, their child is performing much better than they were. So yeah. And now we have crossover population, which is basically just iterating over the entirety of the population. We're going to cross over all members of the population. So first we iterate over the elite to keep them, to make sure that they're in the pool, and we cross over everyone else and we append them to the children list. So go ahead and do this, and yeah, this is our list of salesmen. And now we get into the fun part. So mutations. So how exactly do we do mutations here? Here we kind of like set a variable to have a hold salesman first, and we pretty much take all the so you can kind of see cities as like individual chromosomes of like the genes that each salesman has. So like salesman has like a list of cities that they want to travel to, and what we could do as a mutation is we're going to take two of those cities in this list, and we could like randomly have a chance to swap them around. So basically, this is what this algorithm is doing. We swap some indices and we return the new genetic code. So and what mutation population is really doing here is we're going to iterate through everyone in the population, and we're going to see we're going to use random number generator. So it's just RNG to see if it's going to each member of the population is going to mutate or not. And if it does, then we run it through mutate. And as you can see here, we're going to try mutating this population. We could kind of compare it to our previous to see if anyone has mutated, which we have a 0.1, so it's like 10% chance, kind of, see if anyone has mutated. And I believe 130 is like different here. So our 8th salesman has mutated. And yeah, so now that we have all our functions, our main functions ready, we have our, first we rank our population, and then we kind of, we eventually like breed them, and then we mutate them, right? So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna create a function to handle all of that, so that we could just kind of loop through it. So we have ranked, right? We have our ranked population that we want to go through. So it's like rank salesman. And we select from the salesman, right? And we go ahead and put them into the main pool. Oops. Afterwards, we would form children from that main pool that we have right here. So children equals our crossover. So we're going to cross over the entire population. And then we mutate everyone. We're going to run through mutate population. So you go through our results of our children. And then in the end, we set population to mutation, or yeah, to our mutation here. Hold on, let me rename this just in case you don't want it to cause any errors. Okay, so it should work here. And then we have a main genetic algorithms function where we basically input all these variables. So we start off with creating an initial population here, and then we go ahead and go into a loop, and we just basically iterate through the next generation. These lists here are kind of just to keep track of the data. Progress is going to be keeping track of like each distance per generation, and also this is going to be a list of all salesmen's like cities that they're going through. So the best salesmen from each generation's cities. And we can go ahead and run this. And here's an example of generating 10 different cities, or 10 different cities with round numbers from like 0 to 100, or 0 to 200. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and run this through our genetic algorithms. And this might take a little bit. So this is our initial distance here. So this is how well our salesman is doing initially. Okay, so I guess in these 5,000 generations, in this particular instance, our generation did not improve. So of course, this is all like dependent on chance and mutations. So we could alter how well our generations do by adjusting the mutation rate and how many elite are chosen per generation, as well as how many generations there are. So typically, the more generations there are, the better they'll do. So if we run through this again, we'll likely get a different result. And hopefully this will improve. And yeah, in this case it did not improve either. But yeah, okay. And does anyone have any questions? Okay. Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you, Nolan. Let's switch back to the presentation. Okay, cool. Round of applause for Nolan. Okay, so we just went over the implementation of a genetic algorithm to solve a really complicated problem. And the genetic algorithm template can be applied to basically any problem that meets these requirements. We need to be able to randomly generate a wide variety of candidate solutions. We need to be able to measure how well each solution solves the problem. And we need various methods of crossover and mutation to test. This makes genetic algorithms useful for optimizing the parameters of a neural network. In particular, our fitness function for the genetic algorithm would be identical or proportional to the objective function of the network. In summary, genetic algorithms are a pretty good way of brute force optimizing a solution to a problem, which makes this especially useful for developing AI. Finally, we want to give our special thanks to Professor Gupta of the Cognitive Science Department for inspiring this workshop and for providing the textbook that most of this workshop's content is based off of. We covered the surface level concepts behind genetic algorithms, and if you're interested in learning more, we encourage you to consider enrolling in COGS 186, Advanced Machine Learning Methods, with Professor Gupta this summer during summer session 2. The only prerequisite for this course is either COGS 108 or COGS 109. And this class will go more in depth into genetic algorithms, explore other biology-inspired algorithms such as particle swarm optimization, and discuss other methods in optimizations like simulated annealing and gradient descent. And that concludes our workshop. For all of you here and in the virtual audience, we invite you to take a minute to fill out our exit form before leaving. You can visit acm.url/exit-form or scan the QR code on screen. We use that form to collect feedback and improve our workshops in the future. It means a lot to us, so thank you for filling it out. Nolan and I will stick around a bit to answer any remaining questions. You're also very welcome to continue asking questions or discuss workshop content in our Discord server. The invite link is acm.url/discord. Again, thank you all for coming.